Beneath the endless canopy of the Amazon, where the air hums with life and mist curls around ancient trees, there lies another world, one not of roots and rivers, but of stone, geometry, and memory. For centuries, explorers have walked these jungles believing them untouched, eternal. Yet the truth buried beneath the soil tells a different story, of a civilization vast, complex, and forgotten. A civilization that built wonders in harmony with nature and then vanished without a sound. This is the story of the empire that erased itself. The Amazon has always been a paradox, a paradise and a labyrinth. Early explorers called it the Green Hell. To them, it was an impenetrable wilderness, a world where everything grows, rots, and devours itself in endless cycles. But as they ventured deeper, some returned with strange tales, stories of grand roads cutting through the forest, of stone plazas and towering mounds hidden under the vines. Their words were written in journals and dismissed as delusions born from fever and hunger. The jungle, scholars insisted, could never have supported a city. It was too hostile, too poor in nutrients, too wild for civilization. The myth of El Dorado, the city of gold, became a symbol of obsession and madness. But myths have roots, and sometimes those roots lead to truth. In 1542, Spanish explorer Francisco de Orellana made the first recorded journey along the length of the Amazon River. His expedition was grueling, filled with starvation and conflict. Yet Orellana's account contained something astonishing. He described seeing dense populations, villages stretching for miles, and vast fields of cultivated land. To him, this was no wilderness. It was a world of cities, but his contemporaries mocked him. The jungle he described vanished before anyone else could see it. By the time later explorers retraced his route, centuries later, the land was empty. For hundreds of years, Orellana's vision was forgotten. Archaeologists built a different story, that the Amazon had always been primitive, sparsely populated by small nomadic tribes. Civilization, they said, belonged to the highlands, to the Andes, the Maya, the Aztec, the Inca. The rainforest was too poor to feed cities. It was a world of isolation, not empire. Then, in the late 20th century, something began to shift. Farmers clearing land in the western Amazon discovered patches of deep, black soil unlike anything else in the region. Locals called it terra preta, black earth. It was fertile, rich, and self-sustaining. Scientists tested it and found it wasn't natural. It had been engineered. The soil was filled with charcoal, bone, pottery fragments, and organic matter carefully mixed, a man-made technology capable of regenerating itself. This revelation hinted at a population that not only survived in the Amazon, but mastered it. Yet the full scale of their achievement was still invisible until technology finally caught up. In the early 2000s, archaeologists began using LiDAR, light detection and ranging, a revolutionary scanning system that sends laser pulses from aircraft to map the ground beneath dense vegetation. In places like Guatemala and Mexico, LiDAR had already exposed massive Maya cities hidden under forests. When scientists turned the beams toward the Amazon, they expected scattered traces of small settlements. What they found instead changed everything. Beneath the canopy of Bolivia's Llanos de Mojos region, the laser revealed sprawling geometric patterns, massive circles, rectangles, and causeways. Further north, in Brazil's Mato Grosso and Acre regions, the same patterns appeared again and again: cities, plazas, pyramids, defensive walls, and an intricate network of roads connecting them. Some of the roadways stretched for more than 10 miles, perfectly straight, cutting across rivers and valleys. The designs were deliberate, symmetrical, unmistakably planned. This wasn't a wilderness, it was a civilization. The data stunned researchers. Over 150 large settlements and hundreds of smaller ones appeared where no one expected them. Their layout suggested centralized planning, a social and political structure, not random clusters of huts. Some of these cities were built nearly 2,000 years ago, thriving long before Europeans ever set foot in the New World. They existed alongside the rise of Rome, the Han Dynasty, and the Mayan kingdoms, yet remained completely unknown to the rest of the world. The implications were staggering. For generations, the story of the Amazon had been one of untouched nature and noble simplicity. But this discovery flipped that narrative. The rainforest had once been a human landscape, engineered, cultivated, designed. Its wildness was not natural, it was the result of collapse. Imagine flying over that landscape in its prime. Broad avenues lined with palms, waterways glittering under the sun, plazas filled with markets and festivals. Cities built from earth and wood, designed not to dominate the forest, but to live within it. Their architects sculpted the land like clay, shaping elevated causeways to prevent flooding and reservoirs to trap rainwater. The Amazon we see today, with its patchwork of flora and hidden patterns, might still carry their fingerprints. But these cities didn't fall in war. There are no records of conquest, no signs of mass burning or violence. Instead, they faded, swallowed by the very jungle they had shaped. The mystery deepened. What could make millions of people disappear? As scientists compared data from soil samples, pollen, and tree rings, a story began to emerge, one of transformation, not destruction. Around the year 1400, the regional climate shifted dramatically. Extended droughts struck the basin, rivers changed course, and harvests failed. Populations began to disperse, seeking survival elsewhere. By the time Europeans arrived a century later, the once thriving cities were already ghostly echoes under the trees. And then, the final blow came. The diseases carried by conquistadors, smallpox, influenza, measles, spread faster than armies ever could. In a matter of decades, the few remaining communities collapsed entirely. The jungle reclaimed the ruins. Wooden structures decayed, earthen mounds softened, and vines wrapped around what was left. Within a century, the cities had vanished into myth. Yet, even now, the earth remembers. Geoglyphs, massive earthworks visible only from above, remain etched into the landscape. Perfect circles and interconnected squares, their proportions mirror celestial alignments. Some appear to mark solstices and equinoxes. Others may have served as ceremonial centers, uniting far-flung settlements under a shared belief system. They reveal a civilization deeply attuned to the cosmos, the climate, and the land. As LiDAR continues to reveal new patterns, the scale keeps growing. What was once believed to be isolated sites now looks like a continental network, a civilization spanning thousands of miles across the Amazon basin. It challenges the core of what we thought we knew about human history. Civilization didn't just rise in dry river valleys or coastal plains, it also rose here, in the heart of the world's largest rainforest. But to understand who these people truly were, what they believed, how they lived, and why they vanished, we must go deeper, beyond the geometry of ruins and into the lives that once animated them. Because the Amazon wasn't just their home, it was their masterpiece. And like all masterpieces, it came with a cost. What happens when the land that sustains you begins to turn against you? What happens when balance becomes burden and paradise becomes a trap? In the next part, we'll step inside the forgotten cities to uncover the wisdom, ingenuity, and fragility of a civilization that learned to shape nature itself, until nature took it all back. They called it the Green Empire. Not because it conquered, but because it thrived in silence, hidden beneath the canopy, breathing in rhythm with the forest itself. For centuries, this civilization shaped one of the most complex ecosystems on Earth, not through domination, but through understanding. To live here required more than tools. It required philosophy, a way of thinking that saw no boundary between man and nature. When modern scientists began reconstructing these forgotten cities, they expected chaos, scattered huts, primitive farms. Instead, they found design. Roads that cut perfectly straight for kilometers, central plazas aligned with celestial paths, canals and reservoirs that managed floods and droughts with precision. These were not chance arrangements. They were blueprints, a vision of harmony turned into engineering. Life in the Green Empire was unlike any civilization we know. They did not carve mountains or raise stone pyramids that defied the heavens. They built with earth, clay, and wood, materials that would one day vanish back into the soil. To them, impermanence was not weakness. It was balance. Their architecture blended into the landscape, designed to dissolve rather than endure. To the modern world, it left almost nothing behind, but to them, it meant eternal renewal. At the heart of their achievement was a miracle of bioengineering, terra preta, the Black Earth. In a region where natural soil is thin and acidic, they found a way to create fertility that lasts for centuries. The secret was charcoal, biochar as we call it now. They burned organic material at low temperatures, mixing it with bones, ash, and waste, then worked it into the ground. This process trapped carbon and nutrients, transforming poor soil into rich farmland that could regenerate itself. Even today, centuries after their disappearance, patches of this engineered soil remain fertile. Modern scientists have tried to replicate it and failed to match its longevity. This wasn't random invention, it was science, born from observation and patience. To create terra preta, they had to understand decomposition, fire chemistry, and microbial ecosystems, knowledge that would take modern science thousands of years to rediscover. The Green Empire's cities were not isolated. They were nodes in a vast network, connected by causeways, waterways, and trading routes. Archaeologists have traced some roads that linked cities across dozens of kilometers, built with raised embankments to withstand floods. In wet seasons, they used canoes that glided through the flooded plains, connecting distant communities like veins through a living body. In dry seasons, the same routes became highways for trade. Goods moved between villages. Pottery, seeds, medicinal herbs, and sacred ornaments made from shells that came from coasts hundreds of miles away. But trade was not just commerce, it was communion. Each exchange carried stories, myths, and rituals. Across regions, similar symbols appear on pottery, spirals, suns, and serpent-like patterns. These were not decorations, they were language, an expression of cosmology. For the Green Empire, the earth was alive and its cycles mirrored the sky. At night, their world turned upward. The stars guided planting, festivals, and journeys. They watched the movement of Venus and the phases of the moon. They tracked constellations that marked the floods of the great rivers. Some of their geoglyphs align with solstice sunrise points, evidence that their architects wove astronomy into the ground itself. Their calendar was written in both sky and soil. In the heart of the settlements, archaeologists discovered vast plazas bordered by low pyramids and earthen platforms. These spaces likely served as ceremonial centers, places of gathering, music, and offering. They were not kingdoms ruled by tyrants, but federations bound by shared ritual. Leadership may have flowed like the rivers, collective, seasonal, responsive to change. One of the most fascinating discoveries lies in their relationship with water. The Amazon's greatest threat has always been its own abundance, the floods that wash away everything, followed by droughts that leave the soil parched. Yet these people mastered the rhythm. They built reservoirs to store rainwater and ditches to channel floods. Some areas show evidence of fish farming, controlled ponds connected by small channels. Their aquaculture sustained entire populations, feeding thousands without depleting natural resources. Their agriculture was equally advanced. Instead of clearing vast tracts of land, they used what scientists now call forest gardening. They selected and cultivated trees that produced food, medicine, and materials, palms for oil, Brazil nuts, cacao, and fruits. Over generations, they transformed the jungle into a semi-domesticated ecosystem, an orchard disguised as wilderness. The modern Amazon's biodiversity, once thought to be entirely natural, may in fact be their legacy. The forest we see today is not untouched. It is a garden that outlived its gardeners. What made their culture so extraordinary was not its scale, but its philosophy. They understood that survival here meant adaptation, not conquest. Their cities did not defy nature, they conversed with it. Their art celebrated rain, fertility, and the spirits of rivers. In their myths, fragments of which survive in the oral traditions of Amazonian tribes, the forest is not a backdrop. It is alive, listening, judging. The people were its stewards, not its masters. But balance is fragile. The same intelligence that sustained them also depended on precision, on knowing when to plant, when to flood, when to burn. A small shift in climate could ripple through the system. And eventually, it did. Around the year 1200, the climate began to shift. The monsoon patterns that nourished their farmlands grew unpredictable. Rains came late or not at all. The reservoirs that once filled easily began to dry. When the droughts ended, floods returned with vengeance, washing away the delicate networks of canals and gardens. The harmony they had built began to falter. Without consistent rainfall, the terra preta fields could not yield enough to feed the cities. Fish ponds turned stagnant. The once predictable river systems betrayed them. Hunger spread. Communities that had flourished for centuries began to migrate. The networks fractured. The empire that had thrived without walls suddenly found itself without unity. And yet, even in decline, they left behind no trace of war. No fortresses, no mass graves, no burnt temples. It seems they did not fight each other. They simply faded, absorbed by the very world they had nurtured. In a sense, they returned home. Some may have survived, their descendants living among the smaller tribes that still inhabit the forest today. Their stories of sky serpents, earth spirits, and cities swallowed by the green may be echoes of that forgotten grandeur. To them, the past was not lost. It simply changed form. As modern scientists piece together their legacy, a haunting realization emerges. The Amazon as we know it, its patterns of trees, its incredible fertility, its subtle geometry, is not purely nature's creation. It is a human monument, alive. What we see today is not wilderness, it is memory. And that memory is fading again, this time under a different kind of threat. Deforestation, climate change, and the same arrogance that once erased its creators. The Green Empire was a civilization that lived in balance until the balance turned. But its final chapter had not yet arrived. Because even after the climate shifted, after the fields died and the canals dried, one final force would seal its fate. When the outsiders came, the Europeans, armed with steel, faith, and disease, they didn't find a thriving empire. They found its ghosts, and in their wake, the last traces of that world would vanish completely. In the final part, we journey into the collapse, the silence after greatness, and the eerie speed with which nature can erase a world. Because what disappeared here was not just a civilization, but a warning carved into the heart of the earth itself. When the first Europeans entered the Amazon, they did not find cities. They found silence, a silence so complete it rewrote history. To them, this was proof that no civilization had ever existed here. The explorers returned to Europe with tales of endless wilderness, of tribes scattered like shadows beneath an infinite canopy. They didn't realize they were walking through the aftermath of an apocalypse. The people Orellana described, the vast populations, the thriving fields, the roads and markets, had already disappeared. What the jungle hid was not untouched nature, but the ruins of the world it had reclaimed. Within a few decades of European arrival, the last echoes of the Green Empire were gone. What remained was myth. The collapse began long before the first ships reached the coast. The climate changes of the 13th and 14th centuries weakened the foundation of the Amazon's great civilization. But what followed, disease, conquest, and cultural erasure, ensured that it would never return. When contact came, it came like fire. The conquistadors didn't even need to march into the jungle to destroy it. Their weapons were invisible, carried in their breath, on their clothes, in the blood of their slaves. Smallpox, measles, influenza. The pathogens spread faster than any army could travel. Villages far beyond the reach of European explorers were infected within months, decimating entire populations before they ever saw a foreign face. In some regions, mortality reached 90%. Communities that had sustained themselves for centuries collapsed overnight. The networks of trade and ritual disintegrated. The plazas fell silent. Without people to tend them, fields turned wild, canals silted, and the jungle crept forward. Within a single human lifetime, millions were gone, and the rainforest had swallowed their memory. To the Europeans who followed, the emptiness was proof of their own superiority. These people never built cities, they said. This land is virgin, waiting to be tamed. But the truth was the opposite. What they saw as wilderness was rewilding, a civilization dissolving back into its natural form. For centuries, the silence endured. Nature erased their architecture faster than stone could resist. Termites devoured wood, floods leveled mounds, trees sprouted through plazas. Without fire or conquest, the Green Empire vanished as if it had never been. But the land remembered. Beneath the roots and rivers, traces of human design refused to disappear completely. The terra preta fields remained fertile. The geometric patterns of roads and embankments survived as faint scars in the earth. When satellites and LiDAR beams finally illuminated them, they revealed what the forest had been hiding all along: the ghost of an empire that once balanced on the edge between creation and collapse. Archaeologists call this the archaeology of invisibility. The ruins aren't monuments that rise above the earth, they're veins that run beneath it. And the deeper we look, the more human fingerprints we find. The scale of the revelation is still expanding. Scientists now estimate that before the European arrival, the Amazon may have supported 10 million people, an entire network of societies as complex as those of Mesoamerica or the Andes. Their disappearance reshaped the forest itself. Without controlled burns and cultivation, trees grew denser. Rivers changed course. The carbon balance shifted. The very jungle that explorers believed eternal was, in part, the result of human absence. It is one of the greatest paradoxes in history. The civilization that erased itself ended up preserving the very ecosystem it had built. Their retreat became the Amazon's rebirth. And yet, this story is not just about loss, it's about warning, because the same forces that ended them still circle us now. The Green Empire fell when the climate changed, when the delicate balance they built with nature tilted too far. Today, humanity faces the same precipice, on a planetary scale. The difference is that this time, we are the architects of the change. We are burning forests, altering rivers, poisoning soil, and melting ice. Repeating the same ancient pattern, but with machines instead of fire and faith. In the silence of the Amazon, there's a message carved in roots and ashes. No civilization, no matter how advanced or enlightened, can live beyond the limits of the world that sustains it. The people who once called this place home understood that truth. Their cities rose not from conquest, but from coexistence. And yet, even coexistence has boundaries. When the rains failed, they adapted. When the floods came, they endured. But when the balance finally broke, they did not fight against the forest. They became part of it again. Their collapse was not just tragedy, it was acceptance. The final act of harmony. Today, as archaeologists uncover more of their legacy, their silence begins to speak again. We see that civilization is not defined by monuments or metals, but by how it remembers its place in the world. The Green Empire left no temples of stone, no golden idols. Their greatest creation was invisible, a living landscape that still breathes with their design. And perhaps that is why they vanished so completely. They didn't build to be remembered, they built to belong. When we look at the Amazon from above, an ocean of green that stretches to the horizon, we are not seeing untouched wilderness. We are seeing memory in motion, a civilization that learned the secret of survival, then faded into the cycle it once mastered. Every empire believes it will last forever. Every people thinks their way of life is unshakable. But time has no favorites. The forest doesn't remember names, only balance. And so, as the sun sets over the endless canopy and the last light fades through the mist, we are left with one haunting question. If the greatest civilization of the Amazon could disappear so completely, what trace will we leave when our time ends? Maybe, like them, we too will become an echo, a whisper in the soil, waiting for someone, centuries from now, to listen. Because in the end, every empire becomes ashes. And sometimes, the only way to survive forever is to disappear.